Okay. So the way I thought we would run this is that we would just quickly go through the first part of the PowerPoint again that we did from the last study session, just to make sure everybody's clear on how the exam is set up. And then we would spend most of our time focusing on CAPFT, so the our FP Act, the Technologist Register, the Complaints Manual, and the Continuing Competency Manual. So if anybody has anything specific they want to add or ask, please type that into the chat box, and we can address that then. Right, so initially I was going to use the in-house presentation. I think I can still try that, but it seems that every picture is sideways. So I'm going to have to flip each slide as we go through it. Hopefully it's not too bad. Sorry, give me a second to check something. Okay, so I will do the same thing I did last time and say what slide we're on in here. So for those of you who are following along with the email, you can just do that. All right, so here's our second study session. We'll call it the last minute study session. So you guys probably all know why I have an exam. That's so that you can demonstrate your competency in a written format, because we all love due diligence on paper, and it just demonstrates your academic knowledge. Okay. So again, you do not have to write the exam to practice forestry in Alberta, as you previously did. Now you can stay on the Registered Forest Technologist Register, which means that you are allowed to practice forestry, but you do not have rights to title. So you can, well, I guess you have rights to the RFT title, but not the RPFT title. So there's no professional sign-off there. So once you pass the exam, then you get to be on the RPFT register, and then you get the authority, the RPFT title, and for some of us, that's a requirement for employment. So we, actually are able to sign off on professional documents. All right, on page 4 here. So again, this is Saturday at 9 o'clock in the morning at NAIT. The room is confirmed and all the good stuff there. I would, if I was you, attempt to arrive at NAIT at 8 o'clock just to give yourself lots of time. There's not a problem if you arrive late, so please do not panic. I know the weather is going to be a big factor for everybody. You have 4 hours to write the exam. It's lots of time. So if you're going to be, even an hour or two late, you're still okay. And you can give me a call, anything like that, or shoot me an email to let me know that you're running behind. But we all know road conditions are definitely a factor. We also have 2 secondary locations. One of them is high level with Jeff Hunter, so 4 people writing with Jeff, and Nadia writing in BC with Lisa Narduzzi. Quite the doozy of a last name. I like it. On the 5th slide here. So what we want to do here is just make sure you guys know the details of the exam and cover off the CAPFT area so that you know what you guys are going to be looking at for CAPFT. You remember those are the mandatory questions there, so we're trying to get you guys, at least 20 marks. Okay, on the 6th page, the outline for the exam. So again, that's 16 questions. You have to answer 10 of the 16. The first 2 are mandatory, and then you're going to choose another 8. So what you guys should be doing is when you receive the exam package, you're going to get some instructions. It takes about 5 minutes to go through the instructions, and that's going to include going through your questions and deciding which ones you want to mark, or which ones you want to actually write. You are able to take your exam book apart, separate everything out into piles of like, yes, you want to address that question, no, or maybe. and you can kind of follow through. Please make sure that you get all of the parts of each question. So sometimes a single question is on 2 or 3 pages, so it's not just 1 page per question. So remember that each question is going to be worth 10 marks, and you should see how the question is broken down. So in total, you answer 10 questions, each question being worth 10 marks, and that will give you your 100. Do remember it's 65 to pass, so choose your strongest questions there that you are going to answer. Okay. Page 7. Oh, I might be interrupted by some barking here. My dog is apparently feeling sensitive. All right. So remember, the questions are formatted into true and false, multiple choice, short answer, checking, matching the correct statement. There's some tables that you get to fill in as well. Please read your marks, or the way the marks are appointed, carefully so that you know you are going to get full marks. We do have one question, I believe it's just one, that you have marks taken off if you over answer, I guess. It's a table, and you have to put some check marks in the table. So if you just check every box, you will get a 0. Doesn't quite work that way. So again, just read them really carefully and make sure that you guys are answering them to the best of your ability. All right, moving on to page 8. Okay. So the 2 mandatory questions are going to be about the bylaws, the code of conduct, your duties as a professional, the continuing competency program, and membership requirements. The complaints manual that we're going to be talking about today could be one of the other 14 questions that you will have available to answer. Okay. On page 9 of the PowerPoint, so the other questions are from the tenure system, the harvesting ground rules, regen surveys from the RSA manual, again, the CAPFD complaints process, incident command system, wildfire prevention, wildlife, the Alberta Land Stewardship Act, very popular this year, forest protection and prairie acts and regs, oil and gas exploration and industrial development, the Forest Act, timber regulations, watershed management. There's a question on federal legislation, and range management, biodiversity, mountain pine beetle is in there as well. And I should say that wildlife one, I believe, is the caribou. Our friends, the caribou. Okay. On page 10 of the PowerPoint, so the reading list, that's on the CAPFD webpage, and you get the drop-down menu for professional exam, and I think all the links are working. The last time I checked it, everything looked good, but again, you might have to look some things up in the Queen's printer. Hopefully nobody had problems finding anything. Okay. There's also the manuals that SRD puts out, so there is the web link to that page. I don't know. Anything that's a table, forget all the stuff that's a table. So again, you only have a day left to study here, so focus on your top 10 areas there to make sure that you've got enough information to answer those questions. And if you're still struggling with them, this is kind of your last chance to decide to study another area. Okay. And do remember, if things are going to be FMA or area sensitive, then we do not test that specifically. We are tested on the intent of legislation, not the word. So it's not going to be anything that would differ between, say, ALPAC and Wirehouse or something like that. So that's why you see that some of the material in the reading list is really, really out of date, especially the one for the OGRs. That was the last one that was common across the province. And of course, if you did not get it in the reading list, then it's not going to be tested. The big one with that is the legislation and bylaws that haven't been updated. So where you see the conflict between the RFT and the CAPFT website, then that's not going to be testable. And that's mainly about the formation of the FTT and the RFP. RPF. Oh, too many acronyms going on here. Registered Forest Technologist. RFT, yes. All right. I haven't received any discrepancies, so hopefully we haven't given you guys anything that is too much off the board there or out of date. Okay. Again, it's not about regurgitation. This isn't like the old policy class where you had to write down the definitions. Some of it will be in your words or your interpretation of others is more about just demonstrating your understanding of the legislation. Okay. Marking, we actually don't have the marking committee getting together on Sunday like we normally would. We are probably going to do it online. So marking will be done the following week, and you guys will have your marks by Friday, I don't know what the date is, Friday the 16th. Okay. If you, your marks aren't really, we can give you your mark, but we just give you your 65, or we tell you whether you passed or failed. If you want to challenge that, you're more than welcome. You can set up a meeting with myself or another member of the exam committee, and we'll review your exam with you and discuss how things went right or things went wrong for you. If you don't pass the exam, I definitely recommend that you set up a review for your exam so that you know where your strengths and your weaknesses are. Okay, and do remember you have 3 tries to write the exam, so not to panic, you don't pass the first time. Okay, so what we're going to be talking about now is CAPFT, so the College of Technologists here. And again, this is all information that you guys got in the first study session, so hopefully nothing new. So definitions here of profession, professional, and professionalism. That is the intent of the college, so making sure that we act as professionals and are held to a professional level of accountability, and especially where we are considering being answerable to the public. That is exactly why professional legislation has been developed. So it was passed by legislature in Alberta, and it's granted by the government, and that means that the profession is self-regulating, which means that they have the duty to ensure all of their members are in compliance. And it's only granted where the public interest is being served, so there's a lot of public accountability in this process. And of course, some of us require a rights title for our jobs, and the ability to sign off on that. So some of the reasons why we have a college. Here's some of the responsibilities of the profession. So establishing fair and credible registration requirements. Okay. So right now that means you have to have 2 years of postgraduate work experience. You must pass the exam if you want to use the RPFT title. You have to be a citizen in good standing. There's a bunch of requirements. We'll be going through them. Also sets out the continuing competency program, so it establishes it. It says what the requirements will be. And the complaint investigation process, so how a complaint is initiated and follows all the way through the college. There's the disciplinary and appeal processes established in this act as well, and the standards of practice, so what you actually get to do as a forest technologist. Code of ethics, code of conduct, there are things that you should be familiar with, whether that's for the exam or not. So make sure that you guys spend a lot of time on that CAPFT webpage there on the code of ethics and the code of conduct. On page 22 of the PowerPoint, so the Regulated Forestry Profession Act, that's the big umbrella here, was proclaimed on April 25th, 2002, and had 3 regulations. So the Registered Forest Professional Forest Technologist Regulation, which is us, Registered Professional Foresters Regulation, and the Expenses and Review Fees Regulation. So 3 things. The 2 that you need to be familiar with are the Registered Professional Forest Technologist Regulation and the Expenses and Review Fees. If you're a dual member, then I would suggest being familiar with the RPF as well. And of course, this act establishes the 2 colleges, and just so you know, right now they work independently, but kind of they have very similar processes and rules. And we're probably looking at some mergers. So the principles here are the right to title. So for us, that's the RPFT, RFT, and the FTT. There's the public accountability by ensuring that 25% of council and hearing tribunals are public members, and that all hearings are open to the public. We receive complaints from the public as well. And the continuing competency program, again, that's outlined here. So it sets the educational benchmark, which for us is the 2-year diploma from NAIT Forest Technology. And of course, there's mandatory registration. So if you are practicing forestry in Alberta and you meet the educational benchmark, then you must be a member of the college. And it is something that you could actually have a complaint brought about you. So if you're working with people who are supposed to be members of the college and you don't report them, that is actually something that could be considered a complaint, legitimate. Be a wrap. More key principles. So the complaint process, we're going to be going through this later. Code of ethics and the code of conduct, we'll be touching on those as well. Practice permits, so they're issued annually, and you may have conditions on your practice permit. It could be if you weren't educated at NAIT, it could actually just be that, sorry, muting a couple people here. You don't have maybe 1 or 2 of the classes that would allow you to have full scope of practice. So that the conditions usually would just limit scope of practice there. And of course, it's unique in the legislation world because it means that foresters and forest technologists have equal professional status. And if you ever look up Annex 2, then you can see exactly what those rights to title entail. Okay. Moving on to page 25 of the PowerPoint. Okay. So be familiar with the vision that forested land managed by professionals who care, and our mission, the College of Alberta Professional Forest Technologists will promote the professional management of all forested land in the province of Alberta. So if you want to memorize anything, that's probably it. Page 26. The objectives are to promote, encourage, and affect education or training of membership, to have a stronger degree of recognition to the public and the members, and of course to keep the spirit of forestry alive within the members. Further objectives, to present a unified voice, so especially when we're looking at lobbying government to give us certain rights, then the college represents us in those rights. Right now, a couple of big things that are going on are TILMA and the, I'm going to get it wrong, the Western Agreement, which is Alberta, BC, and Saskatchewan. So if you're a professional and you want to move to BC or to Saskatchewan, the college is representing us in making sure that we get equal status. Because right now in BC, if you were to go over there, you don't have rights like sign-off privileges. Things are very limited for forest technologists. So that's what the college is really dealing with, is making sure that we get to still practice forestry in BC at a similar standing to what we enjoy here. Provides opportunities for gathering Okay, so the annual general meeting is held in April. That's one of them. And of course, having lots of support activities, opportunities for engagement. Good examples of that are the CIF membership or the tech sessions that get put on. We've got a lot of them lately. Probably been receiving a lot of emails. So just making sure that you guys are linked in for the continuing competency process. Okay, the structure of the CAPFT is it's made up of a council, which is the president, past president, and vice president, 7 directors, 3 public members, and 2 non-voting appointees. So that's the CIF representative and the NAIT representative for them. There's also various committees, and Myra, which is the executive, or who is the executive assistant, and Chanel, who is the executive director and registrar. So that is the foundation of the council, or sorry, of college. Do you remember that it's mandatory registration, so you have to meet, or if you meet the educational benchmark of the 2-year diploma at NAIT, then you have to register with college. And of course, you have to be practicing forestry, so there are separate registers for people that are practicing in a province or taking a leave from practice. And of course, that's if you're providing professional services, so whether you're going to be a firefighter or you're developing annual operating plans or supervising log haul or logging, that's you. You have to register. The exceptions are if you are part of another college and falling under their umbrella. Usually that's just people who are here very temporarily. Of course, if you're a student, then you have a separate register. Or if you are falling under another statute. And of course, right now, there's lots of discussion around different colleges merging. So for those of us who are in the environmental professions, you know, instead of forestry being just about trees, we're looking at trying to encompass chemists, biologists, aquatic specialists. So, you know, anybody that's dealing with the land-based and public resources. Currently, the types of members are divided into the regulated members. So those are the people that meet the registration requirements. So the diploma, that they are practicing, that they are a Canadian citizen, and of course a good character and reputation. Then there's the non-regulated members, so they don't meet the registration requirements. So you can be an associate member. So if you don't have your educational benchmark, you can be a student member in school. Or a non-practicing member, which means you are on a leave of absence. And just so you guys know, if you decide to take an extended period of time off, you're probably better to transfer and pay transfer to the a non-practicing register. And this way, you don't have to rewrite your professional exam. So if you're gone for a period of time, you might actually have to rewrite it. Yeah, so transfer as opposed to allowing a membership to lapse. That's my message. So all the members are entered onto a register. So there's the one register for all the non-regulated members, and then there's 4 registers for the regulated members. Now, this is where you're going to be seeing that difference between what the Queen's Printer version and the CAPFT version. So you will not see the Registered Forest Technologist Register or the Forest Technologist in Training Register on Queen's Printer, i.e. they are not testable. You will see the Registered Professional Forest Technologist Register and the Temporary Register, so those ones are definitely testable. This is how we actually practice within the college. So when you're given your practice permit, you're told that you fall into one of these 4 categories here. This is functional, even though it's not approved. Okay, page 32. On the RPFT register, so again, you have to meet all the registration requirements. You have to write and pass the professional exam, then it gives you the right to the RPFT title, and you get to do your professional sign-offs, and you will be given an annual practice permit, on which there may be conditions depending on your education and perhaps other restrictions there. Okay. So the RFT register, if you're transferring from another college, or if you don't have your, if you have your 2 years of postgraduate work experience, but you haven't written the exam, then you're going to fall into the RFT register. So right now what we're doing for people transferring in from other provinces is that they have to sign a declaration stating that they'll become familiar with the applicable forestry legislation within about 2 months there, and that they cannot practice outside of their knowledge. Further to this, again, speaking with Hilma, we are going to be forming a jurisprudence exam, which would mean a professional transferring in from another province would just write a take-home open book type exam, and therefore it will not be an impediment to registration. Of course, if you're on the RFT register, then you're not eligible for professional sign-offs, and you can't use the RPFT title. You get to use the RFT title. Okay. You still get a practice permit, but of course there would be conditions on there that would state no right to title, no right to the RPFT title. For the temporary register, usually that's people that have moved outside of the province for a while. They still meet the citizenship and character requirements, and they still have the competence. You still have to establish continuing competency there. You can stay on the temporary register for 12 months, so that's someone that's taking sabbatical. And of course, you don't have to write the exam to be able to stay on the temporary register. You do get a practice permit, and again, conditions would be imposed on that practice permit. Okay, moving to page 35. The Forest Technologist and Training Register has been established to house the people that do not have the 24 months of postgraduate work experience and have not written the professional exam. So you get to stay on this register for 24 months, and then you get to move to the RFT register. You still get a practice permit, and you get to use the title Forest Technologist in Training, or FTT. And of course, you do not have rights to professional sign-off. As soon as you get your 24 months of postgraduate experience, then you can challenge the exam. So I think we have somebody writing this year who is in that boat. Okay, so let's take a look at the CAPFT Code of Ethics. So they're under the bylaws, and that's Article 9, which is the guiding principles, the duty as a college member, your duties to the public, and your duties to your employer or to your client. And it also falls under the Regulated Forestry Profession Act, Part 8, which is Regulations, Bylaw, Code of Ethics, and Standard of Practice. So we're going to be going through these in detail a little bit later here in the other document. Jump around, look at the web, something like that. Now, Code of Conduct really elaborates on the ethics. It puts them into plain speak so that we can understand how they are actually applicable to the practice of forestry. So we'll be spending some time there as well. It's good to know which parts of the conduct refer to which parts of the ethics. So I just looked at twice. My apologies. Okay. Something else we're going to be spending some time on is the complaints manual. So what the duties of the complaints director is, who gets to file a complaint, the timelines within the process, and what the investigation process is as well. So that's part 4 of the RFP Act, and it's just a manual that's in the reading list on the CAPFT website. Okay. Continuing competency program, same kind of thing here. It's established in the RFP Act, and it is the manual is published on the CAPFT website. You guys should have an understanding of the intent of the continuing competency program. So you should be understanding like what the different areas of education are and how they pertain, or sorry, what types of requirements you would have to do to get hours within each category. So we'll kind of be going through some of this. Now this is something that's really specific, so it's not like we're going to say, you took a chainsaw course. What does that fall under the continuing competency program? That's too specific of a question. We would be looking at, you know, like what is area 1 of the continuing competency program? You guys should be familiar with that. Incidentally, if you take a chainsaw course, it's area 1, which is structured learning. I have to drink my tea for my tiny move. Also don't seem to be able to advance pages. I'm just going to pause for a second here to see if I can fix this. We've got somebody to represent us within the government. Of course, the college sets out different events and that we can, you know, get together, interact with our peers, and of course the college kind of establishes a recognizable entity. So when you're talking to a member of the public, you can say, yeah, I'm a member of the Professional Forest Technologists College, and that means something to them. It means that the land base is being looked after. So the objectives, which is part 3 of the bylaws, are to promote, encourage, and the education and training of membership as related to our profession, to have a stronger degree of recognition, and to have that esprit de corps. Means we're all happy. Okay. Again, there's the structure, so you guys should be familiar with president, past president, vice president, and the directors. You should probably know who the directors are. The fact that we have 3 public members to make up our 25% of the public that needs to be represented on the council, and then our 2 non-voting appointees. It's a good idea to know that they are the CIF rep and NATE rep. We're not going to test down anybody's names, but a good question. Okay. Again, here's the types of members that are set out and the different registers. So all addressed within here. I'm going to fast forward through some of this because we kind of we've covered this off already. You'll notice in this document too that it talks about the honorary membership. So that's the part of the non-practicing register there. Non-regulated. Okay, so here's our ethics. There we go. So our code of ethics is like the guiding principles of the college, and that's going to help you understand what your duties to your client, to the college, to the public, and well, to yourself as well. So your duties to the college, you have to regard as your primary responsibility the maintenance of the integrity of the forest resource and perpetuate its productive capacity and values to society. Perform your work in a spirit of integrity and courtesy, and conduct yourself towards others and college members with honesty, fairness, and good faith. So, established or elaborating on the definition of professionalism there. You must undertake only work that you are competent to perform by virtue of your training and experience. So even though your right to title says that you can do your scope of practice may say that you can do certain things. If you do not have adequate experience or education in that, then you have to represent that to your client and say, you know what, that's not something that I am competent to do. And of course, there's the expectation that you will share your experience with other college members. So that's why we, college hosts a lot of technical sessions, and we try to make sure that we get lots of information out there. Okay. As a member of the college, you must also make a personal commitment to the process of continuing education, which means that you guys will be recording any kind of continuing competency and get to do that online on the CAPFT's website. And of course, you have to have professional responsibility to the public, to your employer, your employer's clients. If there's going to be subcontractors, or if your employer is a prime contractor, and of course to the college as well. So here's your duties to the public, and do remember that the public, even though they may not be fully familiar with the way forestry works, they still have the opportunity to bring a complaint against you for anything that could be perceived as unprofessional behavior. So always keeping the public kind of in the loop and looking after the public's interests. So to the public, you must have proper regard in your work for health, safety, and welfare of the public, so not putting anybody at risk. You must promote opportunities to contribute to public understanding. And this is why a lot of our events and stuff are open to the public. You must sign only those documents, plans, reports, maps, and specifications that you prepared yourself or were prepared under your direct supervision. So if you had nothing to do with the project, you cannot sign off on that. It also gives you you must give consideration and recognition for assistance, methods, facts, or opinions provided by the public and special interest groups. So where there's consultation process or you were gathering information from someone else, you must give recognition. And you must be prepared to express your opinions on forestry matters, not only on the basis of knowledge, skill, experience, and honest conviction, and you must refute untrue, bias, or exaggerated statements. Okay? You can't lie to the public. Very disappointing. Your duties to your employer include providing professional services in the best interest of each employer or client, and not to disclose confidential information without the direct consent of that employer or client, unless it is required to do so by law. So if your employer breaks the law and you have to go to court over that, then you get to break confidence, but otherwise, no. You must also not undertake any assignment for your client which could create a conflict of interest. And that could be a conflict of interest to your employer or to their client. If there is anything that could be perceived as a conflict of interest, you should disclose that to your employer or your client. Trying to think of a good example of where a conflict of interest could be coming up. Maybe I'll think of something later. You must also advise your employer or your client of the consequences of any contemplated course of action, which might not be based on sound forestry practices. So if you think that your employer is going wrong and could do something that would, let's say, contravene a piece of legislation, then you actually are legally obligated, or professionally obligated, I should say, to inform your employer. So you're not allowed to just let them walk into things. Okay. Do remember all of those. They could be, a complaint could be brought against you for not following through with them, not just to the letter, but to the spirit as well. Okay, so the code of conduct that elaborates on the ethics and, again, just puts it into plain speak. The definition of the practice of forestry, again, if you ever wanted to memorize anything, that's always a good one to memorize. So the appraisal and evaluation of forests and forested lands, development of integrated forest resource management plans and programs for harvesting and renewal of forest crops, Okay, so that RSA manual is in there. Classification, conservation, reclamation, improvement, or protection of forests or land of forested soils for forestry purposes, the preparation of forest resource management plans, the development or improvements on forested lands for forestry purposes, and the conducting of economic or market studies of forestry. So why do you need to know the definition of the practice of forestry? Well, because we say if you're practicing forestry on Alberta land, then you must be a member of the college. So all of these people that are, doing timber study analysis and regen surveys and soil studies that have anything to do with forestry, well, they should be members of the college, and they should fall under the professional umbrella that we represent. All right. Moving on to page 7 of the study document. Oh, I missed something at the bottom there. Let me go back. All right, two more parts of the definition of the practice of forestry. So the teaching of forestry at a college or university, and the conducting of research activities as pertain to forestry. Two more things that are part of the practice of forestry. Okay, so the sample questions that are contained in this are some good examples of what you are going to see on the exam. Of course, they're not broken down or given marks or anything like that, but this is the type of information that we would be expecting you to demonstrate your understanding of. So the relationship between the college and the Regulated Forestry Profession Act. Okay, well, the Regulated Forestry Profession Act established the existence of the college and the rules by which the college would exist. Okay? 5 key principles of the Regulated Forestry Profession Act. You should know, what the intent is, that there's continuing competency, mandatory regulation, the complaints, what exactly were they trying to do with the RFP Act. List 4 items from the mission statement of the college. Okay. List the council positions, so president, past president, vice president, the 7 directors, the 2 non-voting members, and the 3 public members. Try to understand what the role of the public member on the council is, and in order to do that, you need to understand how someone gets elected to one of the public roles. So we're going to be going through that in a minute here. Okay. And of course, a good question is, what are the requirements of a person must reach in order to become listed on the registered forest professional forest technologist? Brutal. I messed up somewhere in there. So how do you get on the RFP register? What are the requirements there? You guys definitely need to know that one. Understand what your privileges are as a RPFT, and again, know your duties to the college, to your client or employer, and to the public as well. List 4 different ethics of practice for each. So if you're looking at the ethics and then the code of conduct, it's broken down. And you could know the definition of the practice of forestry. I mean, it's not like we're going to ask what is the definition of the practice of forestry, but we could say, given this definition, how do you feel it applies to continuing competency, membership, etc. Right. And that's all I have for my little CAPFT study document there. So we are going to run across to the webpage. Does anybody have any questions so far as we go through this information? All right. So if you go to www.capft.ca, or hopefully you're able to follow along on the desktop here. Again, you go to Regulating the Profession and drop down to Professional Exam. That's to get you over to the reading list. And the other things we're going to be looking at are the Professional Act and Regulations, bylaws, Code of Conduct, the Continuing Competency Program, and where is it? Oh, we have to go onto the list itself to see the complaints. Okay. I'm just going to the Professional Acts and Regulation tab here, and you can see that it's giving us the links over to the Queen's Printer. Sorry, it takes a while to load sometimes. Okay. Now I'd say this version here is the one that's provided as a document. It's not actually from the Queen's Printer. But they're the same. We haven't messed any of those up. Right. Sorry, let me go back up here. So you can see that under the Regulated Forestry Profession Act, it's broken down into a number of parts. So part one is about the governance, which means, you know, looking at how the college is established, looking at that council, the different committees that are associated, and that's going to include the Competence Committee, Registration Committee, and the Complaints Committee, and that they cover our hearings and tribunals. And under part two, we see registration, so that's what we keep talking about here, you know, whether you're an RBF or an RBFT or all that stuff. Talks about how you actually renew your annual practice permit. Part three is about continuing competence, so it says, you know, what you actually have to do to have continuing competence. And part four is about professional conduct, so again, looking at those code of ethics, code of conduct items, and you know, how they show that we are accountable to the public. All right. A lot of these parts here are also about the complaints process. Okay. And then, of course, there's a few other things that you might want to know. Your right to title is covered in Part 7. And in Part 8, that's when the bylaws, code of ethics, and the standard of practice are outlined. Part 9 is about any amendments. Okay, so right now that's what's happening with us, and why you see the difference between the Queen's Printer version and the CAPFT version is because we it hasn't come into force and hasn't been reviewed through legislation. It's pretty hard to get it up there on the list. Okay, here's the two schedules. So the profession of registered professional foresters and registered professional forest technologists. Okay, and of course, because it's an act, there's a whole bunch of things here that are defined. You'll notice that the practice of forestry is in here as well. It is slightly different than the one that you see on the CAPFT webpage, but it's the intent here is the same. Always good to know. Okay, so this is the information that we've been going through here. Here's 5 roles of the college. Okay, so remember that was one of those practice questions. Also sets out the requirement for an annual report. So you guys can read that whenever you want from the CAPFT webpage. All right, so what we're going to do is go down to 8 and 9. So the if I can find myself in here. Okay. So part 8 is regulations, bylaws, code of ethics, and the standard of practice. So the council gets to make regulations that that set out the restrictions that could be on your practice permit, and that could include educational restrictions, experience, enrollment in programs. Also, it talks about how we're going to incorporate professionals from other jurisdictions. So if you're coming in from DC, it talks about putting in conditions on the each category. So that's why you see that we have all the different registers there. each one has different conditions for membership. Okay. And these are the areas that we're allowed to make bylaws about. So when you're actually looking at the forest professional technologist regulation there, this is what it talks about. It addresses all of these issues. So the college may or must make bylaws that outline these rules, or outlined by these rules. Okay, Lieutenant Governor and Council, that's always a good name to remember because that's the one that looks over our regulations and, it's really our main interaction with the government there, is the Lieutenant Governor and Council. Okay, they're the ones that bring our act into force. All right, so we're going to burn back over here to the CAPFT webpage. And you can see you don't have to know like every single word in the Act. Big important things are to know how the Act enables the regulation. All right, so let's go over bylaws. So from the Act, you can see that the council had to make certain bylaws pertaining to a number of areas. So here's all of our different bylaws that we have. They're divided up into articles there. So let's pick one, ethics. Look, it's the Code of Ethics, and you can see that outlines the duties of the college member, the duties to the public, and the duties to your employer or client. So that's what we went through earlier. So this is what you guys need to have a good understanding of. This is your layman's terms here. Okay. If you want to see them broken down further, you go to the Code of Conduct. Okay, and you can see duties as a regulated member. Okay, so Ethic 1A is maintaining the integrity of the forest resource. Good. So these are some standards of practice that are associated with maintaining the integrity of the forest resource. You must consider all of the resources for their inherent value, whether that's economic or a need for resource, economic, recreational, aesthetic, or cultural. Make management decisions that are in the best interest of the public. You must also follow sound ecological principles and make management decisions based on valid current information. Okay, so the latest inventory. I had a boss who hated ADI and he just loves phase 3. We use phase 3 for inventory all the time. Not the one you submitted to the government, just the internal one. College members should examine the potential impacts that result from management decision and mitigate any impacts that would imperil the resource. Okay, so this is how you are going to maintain the ethic of the integrity of forest resource, right? So again, they're all broken down like that. How are you going to show integrity and courtesy? So you can't lie, can't knowingly mislead, can't discredit other people. Oh, can't use bribes, can't accept bribes. So it's outlining it in plain commentary on how you're going to follow through with the ethic. Okay. So a question that you might be looking at on the page is, all right, ethic, integrity and courtesy. What are some of the standards of practice? And then you guys will be able to write some of these down. And it's not like you have to say, college members shall not use bribes, right? You're just going to say, bulletin format. Can't accept a bribe, can't give a bribe, right? They're all outlined here, okay, as to which standard of practice, which ethic applies to it, and then, of course, which ethic and then which standard of practice applies to that ethic, okay? So this is definitely a document that you guys should be familiar with. Again, not just for the exam, but for the fact that you want to be a professional and maintain your duties to your clients, yourself, college, and the public. Okay, so let's run back to our bylaws here. And you can see how these things are all embedded within each other. Oh, look at that. Council. Okay, so there's all of your positions here. All these people are elected. I don't know why there's a space there. Who are we missing? Okay. Do you know that you have to be a member in good standing to be eligible for any office? Okay. And you guys should be familiar with the election process. Okay. So knowing that at the annual general meeting, every 2 years, a officer position is up for election, and we alternate years. So there's, I think there's 4 people that are up every year for election. Now, you should also know that the exception to this is a president, past president, vice president position. That person is a member of the council for 3 years, but they actually change position every year. So the first year you're elected in, you get to be vice president, then you automatically move to president, and then again automatically to past president in your 3rd year. Okay, so you only have to get elected once, but you do hold that position for, or hold parts of that position for 3 years. Okay. So it shows that competence director, complaints director, and exam director are elected in odd years, and membership, hearings, and communication and finance are in even years, right? You should also know what happens whenever we have a vacancy. So we usually attempt to fill it at the next council meeting. You know, emails go out to membership. We start to look around for somebody that's interested in taking a vacant position, and then we sit as a council and nominate and elect someone to take that vacant position, which right now is how Chris Jolie comes in as communications director. Right. Also know that a council member could be removed from their office by a majority vote, and that would have to happen at a special meeting. So it's not a council meeting, it's a different kind of meeting, and that would involve the membership there. Okay. Good things to notice. All right, let's move along in our bylaws here. Over to the disciplinary process. All right, and you can see that it's been repealed and replaced with the alternative complaint resolution process. So how you guys find this is you go to the professional exam, and you're going to round down to the complaints manual. Okay. And here's our beautiful complaints manual. Sans title page. I don't know what happened to it. So this is the complaints process. You guys should be familiar with this. It would be a question, if it's going to be on the exam, would be a question that is one of the optional questions. Okay. So 3 parts: investigations, hearings, and decisions. Okay. Here's some really important points to know right on page number 2. The first one is how the college receives a complaint. So know that a complaint can either be received in writing or not in writing. So if something is not in writing, usually that implies verbal communication. So a written complaint, that's basically a formal complaint that anyone can come to the college with. Someone had sent me a question earlier, can a member of the public file a complaint? Absolutely. Anybody can file a complaint if they don't feel that a member is meeting their professional obligations. Okay. So complaints can be brought to the college about someone that is currently a member or someone that was a member within the last 2 years. Okay. So it covers people that are past members as well. So I guess the way you could interpret that is to say that if you did something unprofessional, you can't just drop your membership with the college and not expect to be held to the professional obligations. There you go. Okay. So that's formal written complaint, non-written. So the complaints director, if they become aware of information that implies serious misconduct, but they're not provided with a formal written complaint, they can still go ahead and proceed with the complaint process. Okay, so if they they hear rumors or something like that, the complaints director could actually initiate the process themselves. That could be applicable in areas where someone didn't want to, I don't know, I used the term earlier, rat. If you didn't want to rat someone out, you could just drop a line to the complaints director and they could follow through with it on their own initiative. You guys should also be familiar with the time limits. So within 30 days of receiving the complaint, you must give notice to the complainant of the action that will be taken. So member of the public, for example, comes forward and says, so-and-so didn't look after my public resource, then there's 30 days for the complaints director to address that with the complainant. Now, alternatively, the complaints director can speak with both parties to resolve the complaint. Okay, you could attempt to resolve the complaint himself or herself, or it can go to the alternative complaint resolution process, which we'll be talking about here. The complaints director could also have some experts come forward and look at the content of the complaint and determine whether it's valid or not. The complaints director could conduct an investigation, or they could appoint someone to conduct an investigation on their behalf. The last alternative is that they could dismiss the complaint. Okay, so there's lots of ways that they actually get to deal with something. Now, if they find that the complaint is trivial or vexatious, or there's a lack of sufficient evidence, then they may dismiss the complaint. Okay, so again, within that 30 days, the complaint director would let the complainant know what's happening and that the complaint has been dismissed. Right. Here's our alternative complaint resolution process. So if you remember, it is cooperative, usually involves experts, both parties, so the complainant and the person being investigated, right? Some key points here that new information, so if new information comes forward or is revealed through the alternative complaint process, then the complaint director can decide how to proceed. Also means that we're going to be gathering documents, okay, so that due diligence on paperwork there. And of course, making sure that the settlement is ratified, which means that the college would say, okay, here's the restrictions and here's the result thereof, and they would actually follow through with the member. And you guys will probably notice if you ever read the financial section of the college that we hold a large reserve fund. That's to cover off things like lawyers' fees. So, you know, actually having a lawyer bring forth the legal process to force someone to follow through with their legislative requirements there. Okay, other things that are good to know is the publication. So if there is a complaint brought forward, the college is able to publish information about the complaint, and that could mean revealing the identity of the investigated person or the complainant if they're both if both the investigated person and the complainant authorize them to do so, okay, or authorized by the ratified settlement. Okay. Here's the steps of the investigation process here. This part here is good to notice. It's establishing on, or it's elaborating on whether the complaint is vexatious or trivial. Okay, so remember, the complaints director has the option to just determine whether the complaint is not valid, and then they can dismiss it themselves. So the complaints director, if they find something that is valid, they bring it to the hearings director. Now, the hearings director is going to set a date, and that has to be within 90 days of receiving the referral for a hearing. Okay. So again, another timeline that you probably want to note. The hearings director must then tell the investigated person at least 30 days before the hearing, and that investigated person must be given notice that they are able to attend the hearing. And and also what the hearing is going to be about. So they'll be given specific information about, you know, why the complaint has been brought about. Okay. Now, at the hearing, note that all witnesses, the complainant, the investigated person, they could be called to testify. So this would be exactly like what you see, you know, on court TV, bringing forth documents, providing witness testimony to say what happened. Okay. So here's the process of the hearing, kind of what I was talking about there. Again, good area to note here is that the Regulated Forestry Profession Act, so the RFP Act, says which penalties are available to us. So the hearings process could be lengthy and quite pricey. The charge of that process could be given or passed along to the investigated person. The investigated person could be fined as well. There may be limits placed on the scope of practice for the investigated person, or they could be restricted in practice. Sorry, not just restricted, but they can actually be removed from the register, so no longer able to practice forestry in Alberta. Okay. And you see that elaborated on the bottom in this statement right here. Okay. Now, of course, there's an appeals process as well. So if you're an investigated person, somebody brings a complaint forward, you're found to be guilty through the hearings process, you still have the opportunity to appeal, and that goes to the Alberta Court of Appeal, and then follows through with the normal provincial process. Okay. This is always a nice thing for you guys to know as well. So what the roles of the investigator does and does not do. So they do not make decisions. They're the police in this. So they just gather information and they present it to the complaints director or the hearings director. Okay. They don't decide whether there is going to be further action taken or whether there's going to be a hearing. Again, just gathering information here. Okay. So the investigator investigates and they look for facts and circumstances. They're going to be asking questions to get more details. They'll be filling out statements, you know, who said what, who did what, all that kind of stuff, and looking for that written documentation that would substantiate any kind of complaint claim. Okay. The investigator has to prepare the report. So again, they only have so much time to do that, right? Remember that 90 days thing. And they would give the report to the complaints director, right? Or the hearings director, I guess, whoever asked them. Okay. Here's some of the notes that the investigator would want to follow here. So again, looking to see if the complaint is frivolous or vexatious. And again, it's not their place to make decisions on that. They would just gather information that would substantiate one of these claims. Okay. If you were asked to be the investigator, again, you still have to follow through with your professional obligations. So knowing that you can't investigate someone that you could be considered biased over, you know, maybe you used to work with them or you would be influenced by gossip. So think of jury selection, right? If you've been watching the news about a certain crime, then you're probably disqualified from that jury, right? Could be the investigator. Okay. So again, some roles here. The investigator has to conduct the investigation, prepare the report, and submit it to the complaints director. Okay. This is how you help decide whether a complaint is frivolous or vexatious. I love the beautiful clip art. And here are some detailed information about what unprofessional conduct would be, right? So you can see that they're relating it back to the Regulated Forestry Profession Act, and you know, if you're not following the bylaws, if you're not following the intent, then you could it wouldn't be considered vexatious. It would be a legitimate complaint. Right. I'm sure there's one other thing there. Okay. There's also some information in here about how the investigator actually goes through the investigation process. So, you know, how they're actually going to talk to witnesses and gather information. Okay. Here's a beautiful flow chart. For the one that's got dates. Oh, sadness. Sorry, I'll find it eventually. One of these charts has the dates in there, but the two big ones you need to know are the 30 days to decide whether a complaint will be investigated or dismissed, and then of course the 90 days for the complaint to be brought to the hearings director. Okay, I think we've kind of covered off enough. There's a lot of information in there. All right, the other thing I wanted to take a look at is the continuing competency manual. So again, we go to regulated profession, the CC program. Okay. So you guys should know what your requirements are to maintain your continuing competency hours. So 75 hours per reporting period, and a reporting period is the year from October 1st to September 30th, plus the last 2 years. Okay, so 3 years makes up a single reporting period. The span is October 1st to September 30th. So within those 3 years, you need to have 75 hours, and 45 of those must be Category 1, which is structured learning. Okay. So the reporting is all done online, and to do that, you actually need to log in with your username and your password, and then you go forward and enter things into the continuing competency program. Now, you guys should be familiar with this beautiful manual here, continuing competency program, and this establishes, you know, what the continuing competency program is meant to do, and how we report, how we audit. Auditing is a big thing for us. Okay, so this is one of the main ways in which we maintain that duty to the public of keeping ourselves current, right? And these legislation and bylaw references, they'll point back to exactly where you see within the Act and within regulation why we have to have the continuing competency program. Okay, we'll skip through that. Now, your continuing competency is your form or your information is very much linked to your annual practice permit application. So you'll notice that the request for both of them comes out at the same time, although they are actually two different processes. Okay, so Part A of your annual practice permit application, that's the online portion where you fill out your name, your employer's information, you know, your address, all that fun stuff. You will digitally sign your declaration. The other part is the continuing competency report. So it's not a form anymore that you have to report. It's just a continuous interactive. So if you were going to do some continuing competency hours today, which this study session would actually qualify for, we can all log into the system and report our number of hours. Okay. So this is going to show where our categories come from, but there's an easier way to look at this. So where we're going to go is to the Continuing Competence Program Reporting Instructions for 2013. Okay. Look, outlined in bullet form. So Area 1 is the Category 1 is structured learning, and you get to notice that Area 1 is about the exam. So this is you. So you guys want to pay particular attention here, not just because it's applicable to the exam, but because you're going to get a number of continuing competency hours for this, and that, you know, gets to count towards your 75 hours over the 3 years. All right. So if you attend today's study session, which is, we're going to say 2 hours, you get to claim 2 hours. Now, if you attended the last study session, you don't get to claim both of them, right? You just one or the other. Also, really important to notice is that breaks, whether that's lunch or coffee breaks or anything, those are taken out of the time. So if you're in an 8-hour class, you lose an hour for lunch and probably 2 20-minute breaks. So you're only looking at about 6.5 hours that you could claim for your continuing competency. And they are quite specific about this. So it's not just the total hours of the day or anything like that. It's the number of hours that you were sitting there getting information. Okay. You also get to claim an hour for the actual amount of time that it takes you to write the exam. So if it takes you 3 hours to write the exam, you get to claim 3. Now you are given 4 hours to write the exam, but you can only claim the amount of hours that you actually use. And of course, you get to claim self-study, so maximum of 25 hours there. If you feel that you have studied for 25 hours, you can go right ahead and claim that. It's just 1 hour for 1 hour. And of course, if you are maintaining that professionalism and you only spent 14 hours studying, then you only get to claim 14 hours. Big thing to note here is that you only get to claim those hours within the year that you write the exam. So, successfully write the exam, I should say. So if you pass the exam this time, you're going to claim this in the 2013 year, okay? Because we're after the October deadline, right? Right. So that is structured learning area 1 professional exam. Okay, so area 2 is referring more to classes that you might take. So post-secondary courses, conferences, seminars, workshops, technical sessions, short courses, online tutorials, modules, podcasts, in-house training, or field trips. Okay. Do notice that they have to, they have to be organized. It can't just be a bunch of you sitting on a tailgate shooting the ducks. And in this, you get to include courses not specifically related to the practice of forestry, but things that would benefit you in the practice of forestry. So, for example, if you took a Microsoft Access course, you could claim this in structured learning. Okay, it's not totally about the practice of forestry, but you do kind of need it to report for ERIC, right? Good thing to note in here is that hours, 1 hour equals 1 hour, and again, you've got to take your time off for coffee breaks and all that.
Sorry. Hello?
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just wondering, if you're training, if you're going on the field and, in a new job and you take a field trip for training, can that be included as hours?
Sorry, you
on a job,
go to the field trip? You went to the field trip, or you conducted the field trip?
No, went to a field trip. Like through work for training purposes.
Absolutely, yeah. That's where that falls under.
Okay.
Yeah. So if they sent you to take your CSTS, right? So you could get oil sands access. You would claim, however many hours it took you to complete that course. Yeah.
I mean,
it gets to be as part of learning or on your own time.
I'm sorry, it's not a course, but it's for work. It's it's not necessarily a course. It's just a field trip, and to see an area. Does that count?
Yes, it would have to be a field trip that was established with the intent of education. So if you were to take a field trip
I'll
out
just contact you another day and we can go over that.
Oh, okay. All right. So yeah, I guess the idea here is that there is supposed to be an instructor and a student in structured learning. Okay, so it's not just like I went to the bush one day. It's did you actually learn something from someone? Okay. Now, one of the great things about that online system is that you get to when you log into it, you get to select items that are already pre-set out, so it'll actually tell you like how many hours you get to claim for taking your RAP course or something like that. So somebody else has already used it. The Continuing Competency Committee has gone through it in the audit in the past, and then they've gone like, yep, that's how many hours that a person regularly takes to complete it. So there you go. Good examples of that are the annual general meeting and the tech session that are held in April. So you get hours from a number of categories, and it's all set out. So all you have to do is just go link in. All right. The third area is structured learning. So that could be, self-study or challenging, right? Again, 1 hour per actual hour taken to write the exam, so it's a 1-to-1 ratio. Okay. Now, a lot of the things in structured learning are 1-to-1 ratio. You're going to see that a lot of the ones in the other categories are not. Okay? Category 2 is about vocational enhancement, which means this is basically you teaching. Okay? So area 1 is participation and involvement. So if you sit on a committee or you attend a meeting, for myself, like sitting on council, that's part of participation and involvement, right? So you get to, you record the actual hours you attend, but you are only credited 1 hour for every 5 hours that you attend. So if I attend a 5-hour council meeting, I only get 1 hour of continuing competency time, right? It's a 1-to-5 ratio, okay? Now there's workplace learning as well. This might be more what you were talking about there, Shem. So if you're going on a field tour, and it's not like instructor and student type, then it would probably be considered workplace learning. So you, again, record your actual hours, and then you are credited 1 hour for every 5 hours. Okay? Now, do you remember, of course, because not everything is 5 hours long, if you attended, 4 things and they were each 4 hours, that would give you 16 hours. So you would be given 3 hours of credit, right? And of course, you have to remember that this is over a 3-year running period, so it does accumulate, right? There's also an area here for maintaining legislative knowledge. So you are expected to keep current with legislation. Really good example of that is the land use framework, AOA, right? The kind of new things in practice of forestry. So if you're boning up on those, then you get to claim hours. Again, it's a 1-to-5 ratio. Okay. Another thing that's important, if you have a mentor, they get to claim some hours, or someone that is sponsoring you. So if you're an FTT, you have a sponsor, right? Not like being an alcoholic. Sorry. Apparently it's getting late. So your sponsor is given, right, 1 hour for every 5 hours that they spend, learning you, right? Mentor, same kind of thing there. So if someone has been coaching you through this, the process of studying for your exam, then again, they get to record some hours as well. So the person that is going to invigilate your exam gets to claim some continuing competency hours. Right. The third category is professional contributions. So this means that you are educating someone else. Usually it's a formal setting. Now, the big thing here is that if you do work and present it once, you get 1 hour for every 5 hours. But then if you do work and present it again and again and again, so it's like redone, then you can't get to claim it every time. Just the first time. Also, if you have any published work, right? And there you go, executive committee membership. So for those of us who are attending meetings for the committee, for the council, or the committees of the council, there we go, then you get to claim some continuing competency hours as well. And of course, if you're doing any public consultation processes, that would include Aboriginal consultation. There's some areas to be gained there as well. Okay. So what you do with this whole process is you enter all your recorded hours online. You're credited, whatever ratio applies to you, and then they take a look at the 3-year running total, right? So every year they do an audit. They randomly draw from a certain portion of the membership of the college, and they take a look to see if people are meeting their continuing competency requirements. So if this is your first year, reporting continuing competency, you wouldn't, like, you would just be scratched off the old audit list because, of course, you only have 1 year of reported competency. Those are for people that have 3-year segments, and then they take a look to see if they have those 75 hours of continuing competency, and just remember that 45 of those must be in Category 1 structured learning. Okay? So for you guys, if you claim all of your hours for the exam, so you studied for 25 hours, you attended 2 hours in one of the study sessions, and you take 2 hours to write the exam, automatically you got 29 hours, and you're well on your way to meeting those requirements, right? 29 out of 45, 83. All right. I had another question that was sent to me. And the question was, what is the role and responsibilities of a public member? So to find that, we're going to go to the Registered Forest Profession Act. Okay, there it is. Okay, and we are going to run down a little guideline here. Sorry, I'm forgetting my words. It's part 2. I think I've already processed. Okay. So if we look, maybe I wrote it down wrong. All right, let's go back to the table of contents. Part 12, sorry. Public members. Oh, sorry. Section 12 of Part 1. And you guys would never ever be asked to, like, you know, quote, like, what section number, what part number. That's silliness. All right. So public members, 25% of the council has to be public members. So for us, that's 3. If we had a complaint committee or hearing committee, then they must, again, represent that 25%. So a lot of times that would just be 1 person. Okay. Of course, you can have more than 25% being represented by the public. So public has to be, public members have to be present in any council meeting, any special meetings, hearings, complaint processes, all of that. Okay, so here's how a public member is actually appointed. Now, they cannot be someone that is a regulated member of the college, so they can't be someone currently practicing forestry in Alberta, and they can't be someone that normally represents people that are members of the college. Okay, they're usually appointed by the lieutenant, or sorry, not usually appointed. The council will go forth. They would find someone who wants to be a public member. They would submit the name of that public member to the lieutenant governor in council, and then that lieutenant governor would ratify that and say, yes, you may have this public member. Okay, so public members can be set into different terms. Usually our terms are 3 years, and they can be reappointed once. So kind of like the American president, right? You know, you get to get reelected once. So there's never more than 6 years that a public member is allowed to be on the committee, council, sorry. They could also be paid for their services in acting as a public member of the committee. So does that kind of help? Actually, somebody that's, you know, familiar with forestry but not working in forestry. So yeah. Okay. I'm gonna stop the presentation here. You can unmute everybody.
Vera?
Does anybody have any questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering, are you planning a break or are you wrapping things up? Sorry to ask the question.
Oh, I was gonna kind of wrap things up since we're on the
Okay,
break
gotcha.
earlier. Yeah.
Farah?
Yep.
Now, you say it's more an interpretation rather than, memorizing things, but yeah, you obviously won't get docked if you do memorize something and then just write it out verbatim, right?
Oh, yeah, no, that would be awesome if you could just regurgitate information. You go right ahead.
Okay.
We just mean, like, you're not going to be marked on spelling, grammar, punctuation. Like, if you want to use point form bullets and all that stuff, that's absolutely fine. You have to demonstrate the intent. Just be careful with some of the things that, like, when you look at a lot of the bylaws, there's actually more than one part to each ethic, each code of conduct, right? So don't just address that. Like if someone is to ask you,
That makes sense. It's just that there's some things I've kind of tried to memorize, but yeah, I just wanted to make sure I wouldn't be penalized or anything like that.
Oh, no, you won't be penalized. Yeah. Unless you memorized it by writing it on a piece of paper and bringing it with you to the exam. Other things I should be able to tell you guys. When you guys get your exam package, again, like, we're going to stop and go through the instructions all together so that everybody's on the same page. And sorry, Paul, I'll get you in just a second there. So take your time to go through the exam, set aside your 2 mandatory questions, you got to answer them, then pick out your 8 questions that you want to answer, sort those 14 questions into yes, no, or maybe piles, and make sure that you've got each part of the question there that you're going to want to answer. Sorry, Paul, your question, the CAPFD complaints process is not a mandatory question. It is a optional question. Something that, like, we can't ask you, what is the complaints process or what does an investigator do or anything like that for a mandatory question, but we could ask you, why do we have the complaints process? How is that outlined in the legislation? So the existence of the complaints process is part of the mandatory question, but the details of it are an optional question.
So, sorry, this may sound like a stupid question, but this document that we just went over here, it says right on the top, in brackets, mandatory question, but that's a list of mandatory questions that are going to be on the exam, correct? Just wanted to clarify.
So the CAPFD document that we went through and was in the last email as well, that covers all the mandatory stuff. So it talks about the, the council, the registers, all of that is mandatory to understand. And any of it is testable. So it could be like, most of the time there's, a certain number of points brought forth from each. So you would be asked, like, the 10 questions. I think there's 10 questions at the end of the study document. Just make sure that, 10 questions. That would kind of be like what you're saying. You would have 1 point from each of those kind of things.
What's worth the most, the interpretation questions, the 5 out of the 8 that you got to pick? Is that right?
Well, each question is weighted the same. So each question is worth 10 marks. So the 2 mandatory questions are 20% of your exam. So if you know your college stuff, like, off by heart, if the study document totally makes sense to you, then you already got 20 of your 65%. So it's basically a third of your exam, right?
Gotcha.
And the other ones are, that's why I want to focus on this for the study session, because that's a big chunk of your pass mark. Plus, you should know it just because you're a member.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. Any other questions we have? So I'm going to be driving to Edmonton tomorrow, but you guys are welcome to shoot me an email or give me a call if you got any last minute questions. And I will see you guys 8 o'clock on Saturday morning for those of you who are writing in Edmonton. Again, exam starts at 9. I just suggest getting there early so you're not all stressed out. You guys should make sure you get a good night's sleep, because if you know how REM sleep works, that if you don't sleep on information you study, you probably will not be able to regurgitate that onto the exam. So, you know, if you spend all day tomorrow studying, make sure you get 8 hours of sleep tomorrow night, right? And then you actually have that information in your long-term memory, and you can put it down on a piece of paper. And try to stay away from the caffeine, okay, because it wrecks your REM sleep, which wrecks your ability to put information out. And in the exam, you guys are allowed to bring food and drinks and all of that stuff. You are allowed to leave for washroom breaks, but they're usually like supervised, not in the stall kind of supervised, but you know, we check to make sure you don't have study material in the washroom. There you go. All right. You guys all feeling confident? I'm muting everyone. Right, too much feedback. You again. All right. Well, I'm going to call it then. So, if you guys want, you can log in and get 2 hours of continuing competency in Category 1, Area 1, Structured Learning Professional Exam. Okay. Good luck on the exam. Bye.